From here to the stars. I am your host, Stephen Euin Cobb. Our guest today is Dr. Andreas M. Hein. He is Associate Professor of Space Systems Engineering at SNT University of Luxembourg. He obtained his PhD at the Technical University of Munich in Space Systems Engineering. He is Executive Director and Chairman of the Technical Research Committee of the Initiative for Interstellar Studies, I4IS. He also worked at the European Space Agency's Strategy and Architecture Office on stakeholder analysis for future crewed space exploration. He has published over 30 articles on interstellar travel in peer-reviewed international journals and conferences. He is a member of the International Honor Society for Systems Engineering Omega Alpha Association and a Fellow of the British Interplanetary Society. Doctor, in addition to all that, you are the General Chair of the Interstellar Research Group's Interstellar Symposium to be held December 2 through 5, 2024 in Luxembourg. Tell us about the plans for this event, specifically the venue, the speakers, and the topics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first European Interstellar Symposium is going to take place in the country of Luxembourg and then in the city of Luxembourg at the European Convention Center. And the European Convention Center is a superb venue. It's actually used for many prestigious events in Luxembourg. But we are going to be part of the so-called Luxembourg Space Week, which is organized by the Luxembourg Space Agency. And we're going to be part of this bigger event around which includes conferences on new space. I think the Moon Village Association is also going to do an event, et cetera, et cetera. And in this bigger framework, we are going to organize the first European Interstellar Symposium. So it's a great event. It also allows for mingling, interacting with people who attend these other events. And it's really going to be one of the major space events in 2024, not only in Luxembourg, but I would say in Europe. In terms of the speakers, we're still compiling the list of the keynote speakers, but what I can already say is that we really got positive responses from top-notch people within the interstellar field, but also people who really are at the forefront of their respective domains. Yeah, so it's going to be. I'm just keeping it still as a surprise. But you will really be impressed by the lineup of people we got so far, and it's really going to be a conference which is going to be memorable. Yeah, also in terms of the keynote speakers, but also in terms of the speakers. I mean, so far we really got a positive response from a lot of people within the interstellar community who have been contributing to the community for a long time, and it's really going to represent the interstellar community at an international level at large. In terms of the topics, so we are going to focus on first of all topics related to astronomy, astrophysics, in order to under the perspective of where do we want to go with interstellar flights. But then we are also going to focus on interstellar travel itself, the individual technologies. Propulsion is going to obviously play a big role here, but also communications, onboard autonomy, AI. If it's about crewed interstellar travel, crew health, life support systems, etc. So basically, if you think about the different subsystems of an interstellar spacecraft, those subsystems are going to be represented in one way or another at the conference.
Okay. I mentioned that you are the Executive Director and Chairman of the Technical Research Committee of the Initiative for Interstellar Studies. That is, what is the I4IS? Specifically, what are its goals and what do they do to achieve these goals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Initiative for Interstellar Studies is a UK-based not-for-profit company, which was founded in 2012. So we are now about 12 years in operation. And we are focusing on doing R&D and educational activities towards the realization of interstellar travel. So that's basically our main mission, so to say. So that's what we are doing. And our vision is to contribute to an interstellar capable society, so to speak, which means that we're going to work on different topics in order to really enable our civilization to one day embark towards the stars. Now, the way how we do it is we work a lot. We basically work project-based, meaning that we have different topics that focus on, for example, specific mission concepts, specific technologies. But we also have a publication called Principium, which is a regular interstellar magazine, which is for free, which can be downloaded on our website, and which is a compilation of the latest news from the wider interstellar community. And we're trying to share that news with the wider interstellar community or the interested public, so to say. We also have an educational program which focuses on different target audiences. We have programs such as Skateboard to Starships, which is focused on school kids, high school pupils, and we organize regular workshops with them in order to get them interested in physics and engineering, and also getting them interested in spaceflight and more specifically in interstellar travel. So usually the projects the students would work on are focused on interstellar travel, but we're using that also to get the students interested in physics and engineering in a larger sense. We also have events and events targeting students, like university students at bachelor's, master's level. So we are organizing events. For example, the last one was at University College London with UK SETS. And there we presented some of the results from our projects, but we also had a booth where we presented our wider projects and also our educational program, etc. So I would say, yeah, we have like these three big pillars. So one is technical programs, then we have educational activities, and then we also have publications. Yeah.
Okay. You worked at the European Space Agency Strategy and Architecture Office on stakeholder analysis for future crewed space exploration. What did that position entail?
Yeah, so the bio, I'm not entirely sure where I posted the bio. Actually, that was an internship during my master's, and it was like slightly less than half a year, I think, if I remember correctly, and it was a really exciting internship because back then there was still a constellation program in the US, and ESA actually was looking at possibilities of how Europe could actually contribute to constellations and that to the constellation program, and that activity was associated with that. So I was working on questions of who are the different actors in Europe who would contribute to a space program, and how can we architect or design a space program which would address key stakeholder concerns. Yeah, that was the topic.
Okay.
It was very exciting because it was a time when back then crewed lunar exploration was really a big topic internationally. Now it's again a topic, but back then it was like I would say, precursor of what we're talking about today in the context of the Artemis program. Yeah.
Yeah, it does sound exciting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was like, as an engineer, and I was a student back then, it was really like going into like a candy store and you can't get enough because there's so much stuff going on and everything is so interesting. It was really like a dream coming true, and working with those experienced engineers, working on like this long-term plan for European crewed lunar exploration. I mean, it was really like an amazing period of time. Yeah.
Yeah. You contributed a chapter to Volume 2 of the book Interstellar Travel, which is a technical monograph edited by Les Johnson and Ken Roy. Your chapter was co-written with Dr. Frederick Marin, I think I'm pronouncing his last name correct, Marin, and another scientist I've interviewed on the video series, Dr. Cameron M. Smith. Your chapter is tentatively titled Optimal Crew Size at Both Departure and Arrival for a Crewed Interstellar Vessel. What are some of the ideas presented in your chapter?
So the chapter addresses a very important question, the one about crew size, because crew size determines the size of your generation ship or your crewed interstellar vessel. Because if you have a smaller crew, obviously the spacecraft is going to be smaller. If you have a big crew, then the spacecraft has to scale with that. And the big spacecraft obviously has a bigger mass and costs much more, and you have to spend much more energy to propel that spacecraft. And for that reason, everybody tries to build generation ships, or tries to conceive generation ships which are as small as possible, which means that the crew has to be as small as possible. Now, the problem is that if your crew is very small, you run into a lot of challenges, because on the one hand side, you have certain constraints in terms of genetics, biology, because a very small crew might lead to effects such in inbreeding, etc., and that might lead to an accumulation of genetic disease over time. So you don't want to have that on board. So on the other hand side, there might be accidents, there might be emergencies, and parts of the crew might actually die during the trip. And if that happens, again, you have a kind of like a bottleneck in terms of population, and that has an impact not only on the genetics but also the different skills which are available on board. And maybe the people who were like responsible for maintaining the spacecraft or certain technologies might no longer be available, and that might be a huge issue to maintain, to keep the spacecraft operating. Which means that in reality, a big question is, what is the minimum or viable population size in order to travel to the stars and to have a reasonable probability that you might actually succeed in arriving at the target star system, and you can start settling your I don't know, exoplanet, exomoon, whatever. So that's basically the context of the chapter. Now, what we have done in the chapter is to summarize, to synthesize the literature on crew size, because there are already quite a few publications on the minimum viable population for a generation ship, and we have just compiled that literature and looked into what is like a reasonable range. And it turns out that the reasonable range seems to be between maybe thousands of people on board up to maybe a maximum of like tens of thousands. So that's broadly the range of the population you would need on a generation ship to be viable. Now, the question of what happens once you arrive at the target star system, how many people would you actually need to settle an exoplanet? That's a question that has been addressed much less than the question of the population on a generation ship. And the problem here is that on this exoplanet, the problem is more like open-ended, meaning that the number of generations there on this exoplanet is potentially like infinite or very large. Which again raises this question of how can you ensure that there's like genetic stability? How can you make sure that certain skills are preserved, etc. And it turns out that here we used a reference from human history because humanity faced several bottlenecks in the past. And if I recall correctly, at certain points in human history, the human population was somewhere on the order of tens of thousands to maybe 100,000s. And that was basically like the smallest human population we had on Earth. And all humans today have their origin in those people who survived this kind of bottleneck. So our estimate is that, okay, if we have the possibility to land on an exoplanet with like maybe tens of thousands of people, that might be sufficient to actually create a new civilization on that exoplanet. A third aspect we address in the chapter is actually knowledge preservation, because this is something very important, but which typically gets overlooked in publications on generation ships, because if you are on a generation ship, the hypothesis is that most of the technologies we have on Earth, they are going to get lost for the simple reason that in order to maintain those technologies as we have on Earth, you need a population of millions of people. It's just because technological civilizations on Earth, they're very sophisticated. You need a lot of people with a lot of knowledge to maintain that level of technology. And if you're on a generation ship, that knowledge is going to get lost, which means that the associated technology is going to get lost. So the picture here is that imagine arriving at the exoplanet and the population there has regressed back to, I don't know, the Middle Ages or the Stone Age, etc. That's maybe like an extreme picture and might not be true, but just to indicate that might be the level of technological recession or like regress you might experience over like 200, 300 years on a generation ship. Now, how can you still make sure that once you settle that exoplanet, you can develop this technological civilization? And then this question comes in, how can you store that knowledge? How can you store technologies? How can you maybe relaunch a civilization based on that storage? And finally, inspiration here might come from science fiction. I mean, there's Warhammer 40K. They have this concept of the standard template construct, which is like a knowledge reservoir storage location where they can basically print or 3D print any kind of technology humanity has developed. Yeah, and that might be like an ideal case. So you have something like this on board, and then once you land, this technology would basically revive civilization. But yeah, something like this could be imagined, that you can restart technological civilization at a fairly sophisticated level at the exoplanet. So I would say these are like the three broad areas we looked into in this chapter. And the fourth, maybe minor element is we also looked into alternative modes of transporting humans to the stars. What happens if you transport hibernating humans? What might happen if you transport just individual cells? And what might happen if mind uploading, or if you could upload humans or beam humans one day to the stars? How does that impact like population size? Yeah.
Yeah, that leads into my next question. You also mentioned the idea of transporting frozen sperm, ova, or zygotes as a way to reduce crew size and yet retain genetic diversity at the destination. Let's say, yeah, so they can expand the population or to millions or more. Talk about that a bit more, if you would. I guess the weight saving of by bringing sperm, ova, or zygotes along for the ride.
So this is a very controversial idea, and sometimes people talk about this concept as like the seed ship or embryo ship. The different notions you used here, and it's a common trope in science fiction. Yeah, there are many science fiction novels that somehow take that up, and on the other hand side, there are very few publications, scientific publications on this topic. So we wrote a paper for the British Interplanetary Society in 2012, if I recall correctly, on this. But that's probably the only paper which goes a little bit into the engineering details of such a mission. Now, the reason why, although this is ethically controversial, it might be interesting to look into this concept a little bit deeper, is just because of the mass savings. Because if you look at just in terms of what's the difference between transporting a human and a single cell, a human comprises billions of cells, which means that if you just look at individual cells, you might end up with a mass saving of 10 to the ninth, like 1 billion times compared to transporting a human. And 1 billion times is that's a big number, meaning that this is a lot of mass saving. I mean, transporting like a single cell means like, okay, you're saving like 1 billion in terms of the energy or ultimately the cost spent on such a mission. So this is a big deal. So we thought, okay, it might be worth looking a little bit more into this topic. And there's also the question of technological feasibility, because if you think about hibernation, hibernation is a topic which is around for a long time. But the feasibility of hibernation is still a matter of debate. I mean, there were some recent results that humans might be capable of hibernating, but doing hibernation over extended timeframes, it seems to be difficult. Yeah, there might be toxic substances accumulating in the human body. So it's unclear if this is going to be feasible. And then you have digitizing humans or mind uploading, where we don't really know how this is going to happen. I mean, we have brain simulations. Recently, there were news about simulating like a tiny fraction of the human brain on a computer, but we don't know that well how brain uploading or uploading entire humans that might work. Which means that transporting these single cells, that sounds like something which might be more feasible than those two other options, because if we would transport single cells, we would need to store those cells over extended time frames, and this is something which we already do on Earth. We store stem cells, for instance, for extended period of time under cryogenic conditions. So this is something which we know we can do. Now the problem here is, and again, there's this catch with almost all of these concepts. The catch here is that, okay, it might be easier to transport single cells to the target destination, like the exoplanet, but what happens there? Okay, because ultimately we want maybe humans to settle that planet, which means that we have to grow humans on site. We have to think about parenting, and that's going to be extremely challenging. So there are ideas around like android parenting, but you know, if you look at what parents are actually doing in terms of providing to the child, it turns out that it is very difficult to replace that with an android. Even conceptually, it's very difficult because parents are doing so many different things. So you're basically shifting the complexity from transportation. So transportation is going to be easier, but you're shifting that complexity to what happens at the exoplanets. Yeah, and we don't have like a remote idea of how to do parenting without humans on such an exoplanet. So yes, in terms of mass saving, very interesting, but we haven't we don't have a good idea of how to do parenting without humans. And obviously there's this huge ethical issue, because how do we want to test this, even if the technology were available at some point? I mean, it raises significant ethical questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think our perspective is really purely from a research perspective and thinking about, okay, how might this be possible? We're planning to address some of the ethical questions, but it's really purely from a research perspective. Yeah.
You mentioned in your idea just now the idea of artificial wombs. Last year, I interviewed Dr. Evie Kendall on a number of space-oriented topics, but I also asked her about artificial wombs because she had written a book on that specific topic. For anyone interested in artificial wombs, I would recommend watching the video with Dr. Evie Kendall, since she covered the current state of the technology for a solid 10 minutes. But my question to you is, how might artificial wombs change the mission overall? Because we're working in that direction. She specified that we're getting better at each end of the gestation period and working our way toward the middle. But we're not there yet. And this is an ongoing research field. It's got, people are working on it today without any knowledge or awareness that it might be used for space missions.
Yes, I mean, artificial wombs are very interesting from a medical perspective because it would basically decouple gestation from the female body, and this has like huge implications. Obviously, it's also as much of medical research related to gestation, child rearing, etc. It raises significant ethical questions, obviously, but it's clear that it has like huge implications in general for society, etc. I'm not from that field, so I cannot say much about where we are today. I just read some articles about artificial gestation of animals. I think it was like sheep, and keeping them for a certain period of time, growing sheep embryos in an artificial womb. But I'm not an expert on this, so I can't really tell where we are in terms of that. I think there's some limitation in terms of the duration, how long you can keep an embryo in an artificial womb today. So that seems to be a limitation today.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time for the interview. It's great stuff.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you very much for the invitation.
Okay, thank you. That was Dr. Andreas M. Hein. This has been From Here to the Stars, a video series created by the Interstellar Research Group. The IRG is a non-profit organization dedicated to thoroughly exploring the science and engineering that can eventually open up the reality of interstellar travel. Join us October 12 to 15, 2025 in Austin, Texas for the Interstellar Research Group's 9th Interstellar Symposium. Learn more at irg.space. I have been your host, Stephen Euin Cobb. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and you can subscribe to our channel for other such videos. On behalf of all of us here at the Interstellar Research Group, I thank you.